Okay, I've had some couple questions on the homework, so I'm going to take a video just to give us a little bit of time to review what we talked about today in class, and we didn't really work with variables a whole lot as well, so that'll give us a little bit of instruction over that as well. Okay, if I'm writing the estimate, this is where I'm doing my number line method. This is when you need to find the two perfect squares that's between and find a number in between those to work for decimals. The square root is where I'm using my perfect squares to help find my simplified form. Okay, so let's start with the estimate. I know that 128, square root of 128, is going to be in between the perfect squares of 11, which is 121, and 12, which is 144. It's closer to 11. So I'm thinking it's going to be closer to 11.1, 11.2, because it's not very far off from 11.28. So I'm going to try 11.2 squared, and we'll try that. What do we get? And I get 125.44. Okay, so now let me try 11.3. 127, and I bet that's the closest I'm going to get, 127.69, but just in case, I'm going to try 11.4, and I get 129.96. Okay, so the 127.69, this is the closest. So the square root of 128 is going to be about 11.3. Okay, so let's look at the perfect squared method. I need to think about some factors of 128 that are also perfect squares. Okay, so that means I'm only going to use numbers like 4, 9, 25, 36, etc. It's really important here, and it's really helpful if you know your perfect squares. So I'm going to take 128, and I'm going to divide it by 4, and I get 32. I'm going to try some others. 128 divided by 9, I get 14.2. That's not going to work. 128 divided by 16, and I get 8. So that one works as well. So we're going to keep going. So I had, recap, I had 4 and 32, 16 and 8. I want to find the best one that I can. So let's see if there's any more. 128 divided by, let's see here, 36. And that gives me 3.5. That won't work. 128 divided by 49. 2.6. 128 divided by 64. 64 gives me 2. So 64 and 2, that's going to give me the best simplified version here. So I can say the square root of 128 is the same thing as saying the square root of 64 times the square root of 2. Well, the square root of 64 is 8. 8 times the square root of 2, and you're going to bring that down. If I want to check my work, it should be pretty close to 11.3. So if I say 8 times the square root of 2, I get 11.31, which is correct. Okay, so 8.8 times the square root of 2 is my correct answer. You're going to do this methods for numbers 1 through 5. You're going to find both the estimate and the actual square root. Okay, so here is number 6. This has a new set of directions. It just says to simply simplify. Okay, we're going to do this using perfect squares. All of these numbers I can do just using perfect squares. Okay, well, I would first break this into numbers and variables. Okay, well, the square root of 64, that is actually a perfect square in and of itself, would be just 8. The square root of k squared, well, what times what gives me k squared? Well, k times k. So that would just be equal to k. So my final answer, put those together, would be 8k. I'll do one more for you. Okay, so I have 192 times r. Again, I would break this out to say 192 times the square root of r. Okay, well, what are some factors of 192 that are also perfect squares? So I'm going to take 192, I'm going to divide it by 4. I get 48, so that will work. Are there any more is my question. 192 divided by 9, 21, 192 divided by 16. 16 will go with 12. I can pretty much guarantee it's not going to be 25. 192 divided by 36 is 5.3. That won't work. 129 divided by 49. Nope. 192 divided by 64. 64 times 3. Okay, so this would be the best one to use because it's the largest. So this would just turn into the square root of 64 times the square root of 3. Well, the square root of 64 is 8 times the square root of 3. So now let's go over to our variable, the square root of r. Can I simplify it? No, I cannot. So this just becomes the square root of r. So put it all together, and you have 8 times 3r, and that would be my final answer. You're going to do this methods for number 6 all the way down to 15. Now, once you start on number 11, you start dealing with double variables. It's the same kind of concept. M to the third, N to the fourth. Well, what can you factor out of that? I can factor out an m squared, which would just be m. I can factor out an n squared, which would be n squared as well. So that would be n squared and m on the outside with an m on the inside of the radical. And then you also need to deal with your numbers. Let's look at 16 through 20. Okay, I'm going to do number 16. Now, remember when we were solving the equations, we squared both sides. If I were to square this right now, I still have a negative 3 over here. I need to get rid of that negative 3 first. So I'm going to get the radical by itself. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And I have the square root of n plus 4 is equal to 5. Now the radical's by itself. So now I can square it. So now I'm going to square both sides. So now I'm going to write it over here. I'm left with n plus 4 because the radical and the squared cancel out. 5 squared is equal to 25. Okay. Now I need to solve it for here. Now I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. And I'm left with n equals 21. If I want to go back and check my work, I can plug it back in. Negative 3 plus the square root of 21 plus 4 is equal to 2. Well, 21 plus 4 is 25. Negative 3 plus the square root of 25. This would be negative 3 plus square root of 25 is 5. Negative 3 plus 5 is equal to 2, so it is correct. When you're doing these problems, make sure that you isolate your radical first. So if there is some kind of operation going on the other side, I would move that over first, whether it be addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. And number 19 and 20, I would divide by the coefficient to get the radical by itself first. Hope this helps you out on tonight's homework. Come in tomorrow. We will talk about it. Go over any problems that you have questions with. Come see me in the morning if you need some more help.